Hello and welcome to this fourth lecture of the first week lecture series on the SWAYAM course titled Aspects of Cultural Studies. This lecture's title is Keywords of Cultural Studies, and the objective of this fourth lecture is to acquaint students with some of the significant key concepts, key terminologies and key words that are central to the understanding of this course called Cultural Studies. As far as the students are concerned, they will learn what keywords are and why do we need to learn about keywords. In fact, as far as cultural studies is concerned, the discussion on or the deliberation on the necessity of including keywords in cultural studies began with Raymond Williams himself in the first book called Culture and Society, and in his introduction he narrates the nature and the importance of these keywords. In 1976, these keywords would be published as a book form called Keywords, a Vocabulary of Culture and Society. In 1983, again this would be improvised, more number of words would be included to the 1976 edition, words like developments and words like culture, words like generation, alternate, they would be more radically added in the 1976 volume. Again in 1983, Raymond's keywords would be published with some more addition. So, words like square, like others would also be included. In the 1983 edition, that would be edited by Tony Bennett and Lawrence Grossberg et al. So, you can understand how Raymond Williams' keywords that were added to his first volume called Culture and Society would pave the way for thinking about keywords in cultural studies. So, to understand these keywords, obviously, we need to understand what these keywords are, how do they function in our accumulation or application of knowledge, and particularly knowledge related to cultural studies. We also need to think about the purpose of keywords in any studies. You might have come across some keywords in some published articles, some research articles. You have the abstract, and below the abstract you have keywords, and there would be some phrases, some words that would be mentioned. Those words are basically used in the body of the article in an elaborate way. But you would better understand, or we would better understand what keywords are and how do they function in a domain knowledge, what is the purpose of these keywords. All these we will understand if we go to the introduction of Raymond Williams himself that he wrote in his volume, and which was also included in the later volumes like the 1976 volume and 1983 volume. So, now I will take you to the slide. We will discuss what are keywords and the purposes or purpose of keywords, and only after that we will individually take up keywords, some selected keywords, and try to understand. So, the slide that is on your screen explains the nature of keywords and the purpose of keywords, and these explanations I have extracted from Raymond Williams' book Culture and Society from the 1976 version, and he defines what keywords are. He says, these are not academic words. They are not a dictionary or glossary of particular academic subject. Neither are they a series of footnotes that you usually find in traditional books. So, what are they? Williams defines that it is, or these words are rather the record of an inquiry into a vocabulary. By inquiry, he means the radicality, the political, the usefulness, the intellectuality, the polemical connotations of these words that he has included in the volume. And he says, these are a shared body of words embedded with meanings, and meanings which are political in nature, polemical in nature, dialogic in nature, as Bakhtin would talk about. And these shared body of words and meanings of the practices, our activities, and the activities we perform under institutions. So, these are the keywords that he had included in his volume in 1976. By defining this, he is telling how certain words should not be taken for granted as mere academic vocabulary or as part of academic literacy, that is reading and writing, or academic vocabulary as say, what is paragraph, what is a plot, or what is a story, as we take these words very academically. He says these words, or the words in the cultural studies domain, are political in nature, rooted in our practices and in our institutions where we practice. It could be a college, it could be a family, it could be a university, it could be a state, or it could be inside the train, or it could be outside the club, on the street. Wherever we use words, these words are connotations with the context. And he says, it is necessary to insist that the most active form or problems of meaning are always primarily entrenched or embedded in actual relationship. So, the meaning or meanings of words are related to relationship, actual relationships, the way we act out our roles, performances. So, these meanings of the words are related to the structure of our relationship or our roles, and that both the meanings and the relationships are typically variable. Because we act differently under different situations, so the meanings therefore would be analogous to different contexts. Therefore, it is likely that the meanings would also be different if or when these actions are expressed or described in words. So, the words then, or the keywords then, become the archive, the record of semiotics or semantic or meanings. And these actions and meaning happen within the structure of a particular social orders and the process of social historical change. Think, for example, words like bourgeois or proletariat, or the word we now talk about post-human or post-secular or fake news. There are many such words which are hovering around us. So, those words are not value neutral or mere academic or literary, or these words do not fall into one particular domain called academic domain, but they have political meanings under different contexts. So, we need keywords therefore to understand our roles, our context, our structures, our society. So, how do keywords serve us, or what are the purposes of keywords, or why keywords matter? They matter because they enable, because they show how integral the problems of meanings and of relationships really are, how words mediate both actions, our actions and the meanings. And as in the 2005 edition of these keywords, new keywords, revised vocabulary of culture and society, Bennett would say keywords matter because the intention was always to provide useful, utilitarian, intellectually and historically grounded guide to public questions and struggles for meaning, particularly in the field of culture and society. We are talking about keywords in the domain of cultural studies. So, these are then the importance of keywords, the nature of keywords, and that is why today's lecture is devoted to understanding some of the key concepts and terminologies and vocabularies that we need to learn to understand the nature and the purpose of cultural studies as well. So, now I will take you to the next slide, where we are talking about the traditional intellectuals and the organic intellectuals. You know, Antonio Gramsci talks about these categories in his essay called Formation of Intellectual from his prison notebooks, published in another anthology also. I have given the details of the book in the work cited. Antonio Gramsci is talking about that how, particularly referring to the 1930s, prior to 1930s, 1920s, the Italian condition. He is talking about how universities or how the institutions were filled up with the traditional intellectuals who hailed from the old Marxist background and who were basically hailed from a particular strata, from a particular class of society. They were not dynamic, they were just the repetitions of their kinds. They were called traditional intellectuals, hailing from one particular class or strata and never tried to accommodate or bring in dynamism in their ideology. As against this, Antonio Gramsci emphasizes on the necessity of organic intellectuals. By organic intellectuals, he means those intellectuals who hail from not one particular class, but from all sections, all stratas, all groups of the society. And they do not believe in hierarchy of that cognitive superiority of intellectual, believing or relying on the cognitive power, intelligence, reason. But organic intellectuals who combine both cognitive power with labor, with the outside world. In the simplest form, it means intellectualism in the universities or institutions amongst the intellectuals should be combined with the physical labor, should be applied on the outside world, common people from the below, like the working class, the protesters, the students and many other people who were at the fringe of the society. So, this is called organic intellectuals, which were the need of the hour, as Antonio Gramsci would talk about, and this concept would be brought in during the BCCS, Birmingham Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, in 1964, even in Frankfurt School, which we have already studied. And that is how Walter Benjamin, Herbert Marcuse, Jürgen Habermas, Adorno, they would move out of the four walls of the institutions, go into the public and combine their intellectual power with that of people's experiences and come up with the critical theory on art, on aesthetics, on technology and formulate this concept called culture study. So, I will take you to the slide briefly and then define it more elaborately, and then we will move to another slide to talk about another concept. So, as you can see on your screen, the slide talks about two kinds of intellectuals which I have already narrated: traditional intellectuals and organic intellectuals. Traditional intellectuals are categories of intellectuals already in existence and which represent an uninterrupted historical continuity, who are in reality bound to the dominant class, hailing from the same kind of Marxist, old Marxist class. Now, as against this, he talks about organic intellectuals who could come or who could emerge from any social class, because Gramsci talks about every social group requires a cadre of organic intellectuals to cater to their society. So, obviously, then we need organic intellectuals to talk about race, we need organic intellectuals to talk about the sexual categories, we need organic intellectuals to talk about environment, caste, race, geography, all such things. So, therefore, he tells, as you can see on your screen, the mode of being of the new intellectual can no longer consist in the eloquence, mere speech, rhetorical speech, intellectual speech, but organic intellectuals or new intellectuals would be born in active participation in a practical life, in the public life, as constructor of knowledge, rules, regulations, or organizer and permanent persuader, and not just a simple orator. So, this is the difference between organic intellectuals and traditional intellectuals, and you need to learn about these, and learning about these two concepts would clarify what would be your stand if you want to pursue career in cultural studies, or if you want to understand cultural studies, or if you want to do or practice cultural studies, any kind of inquiry into some of the prominent issues, cultural issues, political issues in your area or in the place where you are studying or where you will stay also. Now, you had traditional intellectuals, you had organic intellectuals. Most of these scholars of cultural studies and Marxism and New Left studies, they talk about these two concepts primarily, but often we miss another concept which is quite central to understand the dialectics between traditional, organic and the Natopolitan scholars or intellectuals. So, in the next slide we will talk about Natopolitan scholars. E. P. Thompson, in the chapter called Out of Whale, in his own edited book called Out of Apathy, the details are there in the slide that I will see, and in the work cited also. In this chapter called Out of Whale, he is talking about how in 1950s there were also intellectuals who thought that the things that were happening, we talked about new times, there were problems in multiculturalism, in migration, in Suez Canal crisis, in test of hydrogen bombs, in race problem, employment problem. So, during all these problems, there were some scholars who thought these problems cannot be spoken, unbearable, and cannot be expressed. So, they kept quiet, or they were silent on speaking on these issues. The urgency of the time needed that such intellectuals should speak, but they did not. So, these scholars are called Natopolitan scholars, and against these kind of scholars you have organic intellectuals. Now, I will take you to the slide so that we discuss it elaborately. As you can see on your screen, Natopolitanism was an active ideological pattern in 1940s. There were two stages. In the first stage, responsible minds recoiled from social reality. They did not participate, but they withdrew themselves, went away, which they found inexplicable and unbearable. The second one was their silence was from the disillusion in communism. They were not happy with the old pattern of communism or old Marxism. So, these were the two reasons for the birth of Natopolitan scholars, silent scholars who did not respond. So, this led to a kind of status quo, and the status quo was called the cultural default. This is what A.P. Thompson talks about in his chapter called Out of Well. So, we should learn traditional intellectuals, organic intellectuals, as well as the Natopolitan scholars who kept mum about that new times that we have already talked about. Now, against this background or around this time, because of the emphasis on organic intellectualism or intellectuals, a set or a group of new scholars emerged, and they would be called the new left as against the old Marxists. The new left was a group of scholars, intellectuals and historians whose objective was to bring in change, particularly in Britain. So, their task was basically the intellectual task of intervening in the new times, new problems as we have spoken about, and to bring in a new model of solution. So, you had E.P. Thompson, you have Stuart Hall, you had Raymond Williams and others who were the members of these. They are called the new left. And they were against basically the Stalinist model of communism. They were against Moscowification, Moscow-like communism, and they were against massification of elites in the universities and colleges. And they were against the Stalin's principles, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. We will learn more about it when I take you to the slide on your screen. As you can see, the new left, the term new left first appeared in the Journal of British New Left in the first issue of Universities and Left Review published in 1957. In the same year, you have Claude Bourdet in his article called The French Left Long Run Trends used this term as a reference to third way socialist movement between communism and social democracy. And later on, as we know, C. Wright Mills, the American sociologist, he popularizes this concept new left through his letter to the journal, the Left Review journal being published by the new leftists. Anyway, these new leftists were a cadre of Marxist historians in Britain. They were an affiliation of scholars and intellectuals whose goal was to create a space for socialist change. And the members were E.P. Thompson, John Saville, Raymond Williams, as you can see. So, these new lefts were the new scholars, and they imbibed, they followed Gramsci's notion of intellectualism, which is called organic intellectualism. So, these were the concepts you need to understand cultural studies. Next, we will discuss the three approaches to cultural studies, or the three new kinds of studies or disciplines called multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. Well, I like to use pictures, but because of this copyright issue and other problems that we face, I will describe through some ordinary examples. What is multidisciplinary? Just imagine you go to the market and you buy so many vegetables, Let us say you buy potato, you buy onion, you buy cauliflower, you buy cucumber, you buy pumpkin, and you bring those vegetables, varieties of vegetables, and keep it on your table. Obviously, these vegetables are meant for eating, for your health. So, if health is a problem which has to be solved through disciplines, you have a multi-disciplines in your kitchen. Each vegetable is an independent discipline. Potato is one, onion is one, cucumber is one, pumpkin is one, cauliflower is one. So, when a problem is approached through independent disciplinary boundary, that becomes multidisciplinary. Now, in the afternoon, what you do is you make a pizza, putting all these vegetables onto it. So, the vegetables here are interlaced with each other when you slice them and put it on the pizza. So, the pizza becomes a new boundary, new discipline made of erosion of those independent disciplines or independent vegetables which we call disciplines. So, the morning the vegetables were multidisciplines, in the afternoon for example, it becomes interdisciplinary, where boundary is there, but their boundaries also share with each other. Now, in the evening after coming from gym, you want to drink soup. So, you make soup of all these vegetables, where you do not find trace of any individual independent vegetables. It is a different texture, it is a different liquid, where all the disciplines are gone, all the personal independent identities are gone, and this is called transdiscipline. So, in the transdisciplines, the individual disciplines lose their identity absolutely, whereas in multidiscipline the boundary is very intact. In the interdisciplinary, the boundary or boundaries are interlaced. So, that is how you understand multidisciplines, interdisciplines and transdisciplines. So, in this lecture therefore, we have discussed some of the pertinent key concepts like traditional intellectuals, organic intellectuals, Natopolitan scholars. We have talked about the new left, and we have talked about multidisciplines, interdisciplines and transdisciplines. All these concepts, these are basically the intellectually philosophical concepts which are basically referred to define the nature of studies or to decode the nature of knowledge or texts. With this, we come to the end of this lecture. This was part 1 lecture based on keywords. In the next lecture, lecture number 5, again we will talk about cultural keywords of cultural studies, part 2, wherein we will discuss words or vocabularies which the cultural theorists or scholars or practitioners of cultural studies come across in the field. They are slightly different from these concepts that we were discussing now. So, with this we come to an end. Nevertheless, I will show you the work cited. The work cited is before you on this slide, you can refer to this. So, now with this we come to this end of this lecture 4 of first week. In the next lecture, we will talk about keywords part 2, that would be lecture 5. Thank you very much.